Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Lalainya Goldsberry, Manager of Living Collections at the Chicago Academy of Sciences, Peggy Notabart Nature Museum. I also help coordinate the Illinois Odonate Survey. Alan Lawrence, Associate Curator of Entomology, Dr. Allison Sacerdotte-Velat, Curator of Herpetology, and Dr. Doug Taron, Chief Curator, and I were awarded an Illinois Department of Natural Resources Coastal Management Program grant to expand the community science programs housed at the Chicago Academy of Sciences into the Calumet region. And we'd like to share some of the work we've done so far and what we're hoping to accomplish. The Calumet region, despite its highly industrial history, still has important remnants and incredibly scenic areas. Some have been denigrated and subsequently restored over time. There are many projects and programs in place to restore these habitats in the Calumet region, and community science can be a significant way to provide important data on how various taxa are responding to these restoration efforts, as well as increase awareness of the area, its importance, and its appreciation by community members. Community science is also referred to as citizen science. The National Geographic Society defines citizen science as the practice of public participation and collaboration in scientific research to increase scientific knowledge. Through citizen science, people share and contribute to data monitoring and collection programs. So it's essentially scientists and communities doing science together. Community science doesn't require that participants have a science background. In fact, with very little training, sometimes only an hour workshop, set of instructions, or a little bit of guidance, practically anyone can participate. Community science is science. It's real science. Data collected by community scientists can be and is being used for scientific research. There have even been important discoveries by community scientists. For example, a new frog species was discovered in 2013 in South America when someone uploaded a photo of a frog to iNaturalist. A previously unknown species of water beetle was discovered by citizen scientists on a taxon expedition trip in Borneo. And very importantly, community science also allows for large amounts of data to be collected, amounts that would never be possible with a single investigator or even with a group of investigators. While the term citizen science, which actually has started to be replaced with the term community science, has only started to come into common use since the early 1990s, the concept isn't new at all. For example, birders have been collecting data since before the 1900s, and the Audubon Christmas bird count started in 1900. While there may have been some reluctance to view data collected by amateur citizen scientists as legitimate, it has now become more accepted and is a very important tool to collect data. There are 3 community science programs housed at the Chicago Academy of Sciences that are expanding into the Calumet region. 2 of these programs are the Illinois Odonate Survey and the Illinois Butterfly Monitoring Network. The goal of these programs is to provide distribution and relative abundance data collected with a standardized protocol that allows land managers and other researchers to evaluate long-term trends in a changing landscape. For both of these programs, after attending a training workshop and being assigned a route, volunteer monitors will survey their routes at least 6 times during the monitoring season, which is late spring to late summer, and very importantly, will submit data to an online database. Both of these programs use a PolyPollard Walk as protocol, and that's where monitors will tally the number of each species they see in each habitat type that are within 20 feet in any direction while walking at a consistent and steady pace. This image shows a sample pollard survey. Each color represents a different habitat type. And of course, not every survey is going to have so many habitat types. Some will only have 1. The Calling Frog Survey is the 3rd community science program we are working on expanding to the Calumet region. The goal is to monitor distribution and abundance of breeding frog populations, helping land managers and other researchers understand species response to restoration and other changes. Volunteers participate in a training workshop and are assigned a route. They commit to visiting their site 3 times, 1 for each calling period. Frogs call at different times of the year. And in this case, the route is surveyed after sunset and Volunteers stop at points along their route to listen to frog calls for 5 minutes to determine the call index of each species they hear. And of course, then very importantly, they submit their data. Allison will take it from here to discuss the biodiversity of the Calumet region.
Thank you, Lalainya. So today we'll take a look at why community science is so very important in the Calumet region. First off, there's some really incredible biodiversity found here. Because of its position on the southwestern corner of Lake Michigan, we have several different habitat types coming into contact in a really unique way. We have intersections of prairie habitat with northern hardwood, and we've got oak savannas, marshes, swales, ridges, and they're really in close proximity to each other. So that's a really unique feature of the Great Lakes ecosystem. And because of this great variation in the habitat types, we have many different species that the region can support. So historically, Lake Michigan was much larger in area. And as the lake levels began to decline, we were left with this really unique dune swale or ridge swale topography. And this topography is interesting because on the ridges, you can find really highly diverse plant communities. And so those plant communities can offer nectar resources to pollinators. The swales between the ridges can serve as shallow breeding ponds for a variety of amphibians. And so it is this really unique kind of combination of topography and plant communities all in one place. The combination of the aquatic and upland habitat types in the Calumet region support many of the different species and taxonomic groups that we monitor. So for example, you can find dragonflies and damselflies making use of the aquatic habitats for laying their eggs, for the development of their larvae, and then they're going to emerge from the water and feed and patrol in these surrounding habitats. We also have a number of aquatic reptiles that live in the region. For example, we've got some painted turtles and northern water snakes. And these aquatic reptiles, along with amphibians like frogs and salamanders that occur in the region, occupy a really important part of this food web. So they're in the middle of the food web. They're acting as both prey and predators, and they're representing an important linkage in transfer of nutrients and energy between wetland and surrounding upland habitats. The region has a variety of wetlands which vary in permanence. So we've got temporary wetlands that dry sometimes as early as May or June. We have semi-permanent ponds that may or may not hold water through the course of a year. And then we have permanent large-bodied wetlands like lakes that will keep water throughout the year. And so this is going to offer, basically at the landscape scale, a very diverse wetland complex. And where we find diverse wetland complexes with this variation in pond permanence, we tend to find greater amphibian biodiversity. So as an example, these are some chorus frog eggs found in just a few inches of water in the shallow portion at Big Marsh. And so it's a sign that amphibians are using this restored site as a place to breed. Similarly, in places like Whistler Woods that have more upland habitat, you may find some more terrestrial amphibians like American toads. And if you just walk along the trail by the edge of the marsh, you can see how productive these sites are for breeding. So these are just some toad tadpoles swimming along. Additionally, the Calumet region is along migratory routes for a number of passerine birds, and it's home to hundreds of marsh birds, wading birds, really a great array that use both open water marshes, hemi-marshes, especially those that have been recently restored, as well as lacustrine habitats and riverine habitats to breed and to feed throughout the active season. There are a variety of upland species. So for example, you can find things like the 12-spotted tiger beetle, one of the upland invertebrates in the region. And we see a number of mammals that will also make use of these transitional ecotones. So in places where we have that intersection of wetland and upland, you're going to find a variety of semi-aquatic mammals like muskrat, beaver, mink, feeding and making use of both terrestrial and aquatic realms. So community science is very important in the Calumet region because there's been consistent shifts in how the region has been valued through time and how it's been viewed. Historically, many First Nations villages were using this region as a source of productivity for hunting and fishing. It was often a very significant source of food. But with European settlement, attitudes and perspectives about the region changed, largely because this is not necessarily arable land for farming. And so it became viewed as a wasted area or a place that wasn't very worth conserving through time. And as Chicago continued to grow, we saw another shift where it was valued, but it was valued for industrial productivity. So by 1805, the dredging had begun to connect Little Calumet and Grand Calumet rivers. By 1850, railways and steel and iron production had really taken off in this region, and it was highly viewed as a shipping hub for transportation as well as a manufacturing area. So all of those hydrologic alterations really caused a lot of sedimentation and degradation of the surrounding wetlands, and with it, many species were impacted. There were certainly communities that were affected by this manufacturing through time as water quality decreased and was heavily polluted. And even as early as the 1930s, there was a lot of public outcry to try to clean up and restore habitats in the region. Unfortunately, the area continued to be very heavily impacted into the 1970s, but with the Clean Water Act, we did have a flurry of restoration activities, and we've had continuing efforts by a number of restoration partners, several of which will be talking after us today, to really improve habitat quality and save the little remnant habitats that were preserved through time. So one of the really important things about community science is that by monitoring these indicator taxa, we can really try to identify how different groups are responding to restoration efforts. So as you explore the Calumet region, you'll see this juxtaposition of the industrial history with the presence of some really high quality remnant areas, as well as high quality restorations. There's been multiple efforts by Chicago Park District and the Forest Preserve District to try to increase community access to these renewed natural areas with development of bike paths, trails, and here at Steelworkers Park, right near these ore walls where we have newly restored vegetative plots, we also have kayak launches going in so that there are ways that people can hike as well as paddle through these wetlands and really get to explore it in different ways. So community science is also important in the Calumet region because we lack a lot of data for this area generally. This map shows the distribution of our 3 community science program routes, and this is from a few years ago, so we do have some additional points. But if you look in that circle in the yellow, you'll see that we are lacking a lot of survey routes in this region. So this presents an opportunity for far more inclusive participation in community science. By reaching out with more community engagement, we have the opportunity to help collect data on the long-term industrial historical effects on biodiversity, as well as the effects of economic disparity on biodiversity. And collectively, with community science participants, we can really try to amplify the environmental needs and changes happening in this region. So with that, I'll turn it over to Doug to tell us more about what the program is doing.
So Thank you, Allison, very much. We hope we have convinced you of the importance of the Calumet region and the need for additional community science activities there. So here's what we are actually trying to do to achieve that goal. We are trying to increase participation in all of these programs in the Calumet region. One of the things that we have done to this end is we have identified 10 sites in the Calumet region where we have created survey routes for each of the 3 programs for a total of 30 new survey routes. We are at the beginning of the training and recruiting workshop season. Actually, for the frogs, we're sort of at the end of the season, but we're coming up on the beginning of the recruiting and training seasons for the butterfly and dragonfly surveys. And these programs, it can be difficult to provide a lot of very personal contact with a lot of our volunteers because we tend to get so many of them. So for this particular program of expansion in the Calumet region, we want to take a more personal approach with it and do more individual mentoring of new monitors as we walk survey routes with them and look together at some of the biodiversity that we will be monitoring. One of the other goals involves the use of the community science data. These 3 programs are starting to amass rather large long-term data sets for the various taxa that they are monitoring. These data sets are only valuable to the degree to which they are used. So we are really looking to expand access and use of the data. I'm most familiar with use of butterfly data from citizen science programs. And we have known for a number of years now that North America in general lags very far behind Europe in terms of using these types of data sets. So we're going to take some steps to enhance use of the data, both from the Calumet area, but from these programs as a whole. And our final goal involves the celebration of the Calumet area, celebrating both community science and biodiversity in this region. And we will be offering a community workshop in order to achieve this. So what have we actually done so far? Well, we have mapped all 30 of the survey routes, and we'll look at some of them in just a moment. These have been mapped and added to our databases. Additionally, the Calling Frog survey, which has their training season in January and February of most years, has provided 4 workshops for the Calling Frog survey, and 6 of the 10 routes that were mapped for the Calling Frog survey have already been assigned. So we've made some very good progress there. Now, Allison, a few minutes ago, showed you the picture of the map of community science survey locations in the Chicago metropolitan area. And you see that big gap down in the Calumet area. The inset map here shows all 10 of the locations where we have developed new community science monitoring routes. And so one of the nice things is that they're kind of scattered throughout this area, which is great. It distributes them spatially well. But additionally, they really capture a diversity of site types. So here are the 10 survey routes: Big Marsh, Steelworkers Park, William Powers State Recreation Area, Hegwish Marsh, Indian Ridge Marsh, Marion Burns Van Vlissingen Prairie, the area around the Sandridge Nature Center, Eggers Grove, Whistler Woods, and we have an additional survey site at Beaubien Woods. And so some of these survey sites are expansive marshes, places like Big Marsh and Hegwish, and as illustrated here, Indian Ridge. And you can see on the left, that is a picture of Indian Ridge. And on the right, this is the survey route that we have developed there for, this is the dragonfly survey route at Indian Ridge. We've got a couple of lakeshore sites, Steelworkers Park and the William Powers Recreation Area. And these go right along the edge of the lakeshore. And you're seeing here the butterfly survey route at William Powers. Allison mentioned Dune and Swale woodlands. We've got a number of those at Sand Ridge and at Whistler. This map here on the right shows the frog survey route at Whistler Woods. And there have been prairie restoration sites. Allison was alluding to some of the ecological restoration that has gone in this area in places like Steelworkers Park. There's another prairie restoration site at Van Vlissingen Prairie. And this is the butterfly route that is being shown at Van Vlissingen Prairie here. None of these routes have had any data collected on them so far. We are hoping to get people out there soon. So our next steps, and here's where we've had to cope with some of the realities that the COVID pandemic has put on this particular project. Initially, when we applied for and when we first received this grant, all of these activities were supposed to take place in person. We are moving now to giving the trainings virtually simply because that's the only way we're going to be able to get them done. So as I mentioned, we've already had four calling frog survey workshops. Over the course of the spring, we are going to have 7 workshops that recruit and train for both the Butterfly Monitoring Network and the Illinois Odonate Survey. 3 of these workshops are going to be specifically targeted not only to the Calumet region, but are going to focus on some of the specifics of monitoring in the Calumet region. The goal is to get new monitors on all 30 of these survey routes. Allison has given us a great start for the Calling Frog survey, where the majority of them, of the new routes, already have new monitors assigned to them. Frog surveys will begin next month, and we plan on working with the volunteers in the other 2 programs so that they can begin collecting data by the beginning of the butterfly and dragonfly seasons, which will be in May of this year. The mentorship is planned to include accompanying new monitors on their surveys. And this is one of the things that is good about these types of community science programs, is that they have ended up being pretty compatible with things like social distancing. And if you wear a mask, you can go out with a new monitor and walk a survey route with them. And because you're outdoors, that's a much safer situation than, say, offering an indoor workshop. We will be presenting a series of workshops to introduce consumers of the data to the various data sets that we have. And there will be multiple of these over the next 6 months or so. The first one is already planned. We are going to present on Pollard Base, which houses both the butterfly and the dragonfly data, to the key stewards meeting for the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, and that's coming up next month. And the celebration of biodiversity and community science in the Calumet region, we are hoping to present a workshop about that in the late summer. And who knows, by that late, we may, if we're lucky, be able to give it in person. If not, we will go with that with a virtual workshop. So a whole bunch of people made this work possible. First of all, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Coastal Management Program grant is the funder for this particular project. But these 3 community science programs are made possible by a variety of other funders, including the U.S. Forest Service, the Vanderpool Foundation, and the Patagonia Foundation, all of whom have been very generous in supporting our community science efforts for a number of years now. We've also been working very closely with both the Chicago Park District and the Forest Preserve District on Cook County. of Cook County. They are the landowners at the sites that we're developing these new survey routes on and that we will be recruiting monitors for. They have helped in all aspects of this. Getting the word out that we are recruiting for new monitors from these areas, helping with site design, making site suggestions for where we might want to be monitoring, and just can't say enough about how helpful that they have been. And finally, if you are interested in getting involved, you can see the list of the links for the upcoming training workshops and recruiting workshops at the bottom of the page. And those links will take you to what you need to get started and get going with these programs. So thank you very much.
Well, hi, everyone. I've been looking at the chat, and I think we've been keeping up with most of the questions. So if you have any additional questions, we're happy to try and field them.
While we wait for the chat to catch up with us, because there is that little bit of a lag, I'm curious, you know, it's been such a great conversation in the chat. I'm curious if there's anything that was particularly surprising or revealing to any of you in the chat conversation so far.
I mean, there seems to be quite a bit of interest in monitoring some taxonomic groups beyond, including and beyond the programs that we're focused on. And I'm sure you'll hear more in some of the talks to follow ours about some of the specific restoration partnerships and monitoring efforts that are going on. I know there was a question about the black crowned night herons. And if anyone wants to update or correct me about this, my recollection is that the colony that had been roosting in Calumet region had relocated to Lincoln Park around 2010 and has continued to roost in Lincoln Park. I'm not sure if anyone else is aware if there are still active roosts in the region. All right, and I see Cynthia's comment about learning about the history of the area and land use change over time. Definitely stick around for the panel that will follow this talk. There are several restoration partners that we are also happy to continue expanding partnerships with. So if any of the folks involved with those efforts from the Wetlands Initiative or Great Lakes Audubon want to talk with us further, we're happy to keep this conversation going and reach out to figure out ways to increase engagement and involvement in our community science program offerings as well as other programs. Oh, thank you, Gloria. I see your comment about recruiting volunteers at Whistler Woods and Beaubien. Those are two of the sites that we're particularly interested in recruiting from. So if you can send us a message, we'd be happy to touch base further. I'm not sure if Cassie or any Park District employees are present right now, but there's a question about when the Marion Burns Preserve will reopen to the public. We do have survey routes mapped there as well. So we're happy to work with you and with Chicago Park District to discuss access if you are interested in monitoring in those areas.